my name's Angel, and welcome to my little corner of the internet. So, here's some background information for you. Goblin was actually my first K-drama. The first Korean media I watched, for lack of a better word, was actually Train to Busan, but that's a movie, so Goblin was my first actual drama. And I remember when I told my friends, hey, I'm trying to watch some K-dramas, what do you recommend? Everyone told me to start with Goblin, and I was really scared to start with Goblin because all of them had watched it before me, and I remember on their Snapchats, there were like several days in a row where they had like pictures and videos of themselves sobbing because of the plot of Goblin, and I was like, I don't want to put myself through that. I don't want to suffer that way. Can y'all recommend something that's not gonna rip my heart out? And then I caved and I watched it. So here we are, 2 years later, and I'm gonna try and explain it to you guys. And we're gonna start with a breakdown of our important characters, recurring characters, I guess. I don't know. We have Goblin, of course. He's like our real main character, low-key, even though these shows tend to follow a female main. And we have a female lead, but I feel like the story is basically about Goblin. So, he is several centuries old. I don't actually know how old he is. He's been around for a brick and a half. And he's some sort of creature. He has some magical abilities, but it's not like specified what kind of thing. He's just a goblin. Like, Goblin is what he is. He has a few abilities that come with his immortality that is technically temporary. Our next character is, of course, our female lead, whose name I don't remember. So for all intents and purposes, we're just gonna call her Goblin's Bride or Bride. Our third, he's technically a supporting character, but I think he's important, so we're gonna call him a main, is the Grim Reaper, whose name I also don't know, so he's going to be Grim Reaper. I love him. Our supporting characters that I feel like mentioning are the main character's boss, who we are going to call Boss Lady, and then the Goblin's nephew, who is not actually his nephew because he turns out to be a god, and I don't know if Goblin knew that. I don't really know the technicalities of that situation. It's never specified what their actual relationship is, but for all intents and purposes, he's referred to as Goblin's nephew. Those are all of our characters that you need to know. Goblin, Goblin's Bride, Grim Reaper, Boss Lady, and Nephew. So, the way Goblin is told, it kind of takes place on two timelines at once. There is Goblin's origin story timeline, where it's telling you, well, this was his life when he was human and how we got to where we are now. And then at the same time, it is telling the story of him and his bride. Oh, it also tells the Grim Reaper's origin story is at the same time, but that doesn't matter right now. It's not super important for the most part. And then the present day storyline focusing on Goblin and his bride, and also the Grim Reaper's very existence. So I'm going to tell you Goblin's origin story first, and then tell you the present day story involving him and his bride, because I can't tell both at the same time. That's ridiculous. With that being said, we're going to start with Goblin's origin story now, which starts with Goblin returning from a battle. So he was a soldier for the royal family, and he walks into the palace courtyard and is immediately accused of treason by the crown prince. And he's very confused, and he's like, wait, why are you calling me a traitor? I just got back from fighting a war for you. I don't understand. How did we get here? How did we end up? What's going on? So, he tries to walk up to the prince and have a conversation with him, because from what I understand, the two of them are relatively close prior to Goblin leaving to go and fight this war. All of Goblin's family is on this second level balcony thing looking over the courtyard, and there are arrows pointed at each one of them. And then Goblin's sister, who was supposed to marry the prince, she's either his fiance or his wife at this point, don't know. She's also in the courtyard, kneeling on the floor with an arrow pointed at her. The crown prince is like, if you take one more step towards me, I'm literally killing all of them. Goblin looks at his little sister, who tells him to do it. She either nods or she just tells him, go ahead or whatever. And he takes another step towards the prince, and true to his word, he literally shoots everyone, and Goblin's entire family dies. in front of him, including his sister who was supposed to marry the prince. I still don't really get why he killed her. I guess to teach a lesson, but that's his wife, so that seems dumb to me. I don't know. Then he exiles Goblin, who wanders off into some field. Like, he wanders into the middle of nowhere and tries to kill himself by, like, stabbing himself with his sword. And then a deity pops up out of nowhere and she's like, LOL, you thought, right? Yeah, you don't get out of this that easy. I don't know what she's punishing him for. I really don't. Because she's like, you're gonna suffer, you're gonna live through your mistakes, and you're gonna deal with the pain of what you've done until you find your bride. She'll remove the sword from your stomach and then you can die in peace. I don't know what he's being punished for. She doesn't specify. She just says he has to pay for his sins by wandering the earth until he finds his bride, who will eventually remove the sword from his torso and allow him to, like, go in peace with the next stage of his life, which I guess is technically death. So basically, he's now stuck wandering the earth with a sword in his chest that nobody can see. It's kind of cruel. By the way, I, like, called him the prince during this entire story, but technically Homie's in charge. The one who, like, exiled the goblin and killed his entire family. Yeah, he's in charge right now, but he shouldn't be. And here's why. Back to the palace story. The prince's mom and dad, obviously, the king and queen or whatever, they were in charge, they were ruling, they were rocking and rolling or whatever. The king's, like, right-hand man, his advisor who did, like, everything for him, was poisoning him, basically. He poisoned the king, eventually the king died, and then I think he either killed the queen or, like, she's not allowed to take over. I don't really know the ins and outs of the story. Basically, both of the prince's parents are dead and he gets forced to take over. He's still kind of impressionable, he's still relatively young, like, he's in his 20s, so he was gonna take over eventually, but he hasn't learned enough of, like, the rules of being a leader. So the, like, royal advisor is, like, basically taken on this father figure role in his life because his parents are both dead, and he's feeding him all of this BS to convince him that the goblin is a traitor while the goblin is out fighting a war or whatever, basically. So by the time he gets back, the prince has been convinced that he's a traitor and he's out to get him or whatever, and accuses him of treason because the royal advisor has poisoned his mind. First he poisons his mind and then he poisons his body. Fun fact. Yeah, so he poisons the prince after, like, because basically the royal advisor is trying to take over, if you didn't gather that, based on him killing both the king and the queen already. Eventually the prince confronts the advisor about this and he's like, yeah, I know you're poisoning me, but also I've killed the love of my life and I've exiled one of my closest friends, so I have nothing to live for, so if you want to kill me, just do it already. And then the prince dies. And that's effectively all of the history you need to know as of now. Moving on, fast forward several years to roughly 19 years before the actual story begins. On one random night, Goblin is, like, sitting on a billboard minding his business. I don't really know why he was sitting on a billboard, but he's sitting on a billboard minding his business, looking at the town. It's the middle of winter and it's snowing. A pregnant lady is walking down the street and gets hit by a car that immediately drives off because they're a terrible human being. Whoever the driver is a terrible person, and now this pregnant woman is dying on the street. And Goblin, because he's bored and decides, I'm gonna go wreak some havoc, brings them back to life. I don't know why he has the ability to do that. Again, the bounds of what Goblin can do are never clearly established within the show, but he brought this pregnant woman and her child, unborn child, back to life. When he brought them back to life, there were, like, cherry blossoms that kind of, like, appeared through the air. And it's, again, winter. For those of you who don't know, winter is not cherry blossom season. Our Grim Reaper, like the one in our story, because he's not the only Grim Reaper, but he's the only one relevant to our story. So our Grim Reaper shows up and sees some cherry blossoms in the snow, and he's like, well, girl, what are we supposed to do now? Because he was supposed to take their souls. What they do with dead people is never exactly cleared up, except for, like, the very end, I think. But anyway, he was supposed to take their souls to whatever the next stage of dead peopleness is. And they weren't there, which apparently is a problem. I mean, of course it is. They were supposed to die and they didn't. So now there are these two souls that are considered lost souls because they were supposed to be dead and they're not. When she's born, she has a weird, like, birthmark on the back of her neck that all of these spirits have been calling the mark of the goblin. And she can see and hear like dead people, basically. Like she can hear and see ghosts. So she knows she's the goblin's bride, or at least knows that all of these dead people think she's the goblin's bride. Her mom is aware that she can see spirits and has just told her not to talk to them because her mom is smart. Her mom ends up dying 9 years later when she's 9 years old. Fast forward, now she's 19. Basically, how this whole lost soul things works, on every 9th year, a Grim Reaper will appear and try to rectify the missing soul. It's never cleared up whether or not they're directly allowed to end the life of the missing soul, but every 9th year, a Grim Reaper is supposed to try and figure out a way to rectify the fact that her soul is not where it needs to be. That means when she's 9, a Grim Reaper appeared in her life, and now she's 19, so a Grim Reaper is roaming around her life. Basically, that's all you need to know about her past. She sees and hears dead people. Her mom died when she was 9 years old, and there was a Grim Reaper that was like following her around. But her mom, either as a ghost or right before she died, did tell her, if you see a man in all black, don't speak to him. So, or like a person in all black, don't speak to them. So she knows better. She saw the Grim Reaper. He like appeared at her door, went knock, knock, knock. She opened the door and then she pretended she couldn't see him because she's smart. Fast forward, now she's 19. She goes to school. For some reason, all of her classmates know that she can see spirits. I'm not sure how or why they know that, but they do. So they all think she's weird. Nobody really talks to her. She kind of just goes to school and minds her business and goes back home at the end of the day. And that's all fine and dandy, you know? Moving forward, we're going to skip all of the like preliminary. Here's what her life is basically like now at the age of 19 as a child supporting herself in school. She meets Goblin in like a library, or at least I think it's a library. We're going to go with a library for all intents and purposes. Don't know what he's doing there. She's a student, so who knows why she's there, but she's a student, so it makes sense. They like talk. I don't know how she figured out that he was the goblin, but she did. And she tells him, hey, I'm the goblin's bride. She shows him her birthmark, and he's like, yeah, no, you're not. And she's like, excuse me, yes, I am. And he's like, okay, do you see anything? Because the bride has to be able to pull out the sword from his chest, and she needs to see it to be able to pull it out of him. And she's like, no, because she doesn't see anything. And he's like, yeah, so you're not the goblin's bride. Thank you. Have a good day. He opens a door and disappears through it. The door is like unmarked, so I don't know where it was supposed to go. She follows him through that door, and then the two of them are in Vancouver, frickin' Canada. So again, the limits to Goblin's powers are a little bit unclear. She follows him through the door. That's what's important, because she shouldn't be able to do that in theory if she's just a normal person. So he's like, how'd you go through that door? And she's like, where the hell are we? Because we're not in South Korea anymore. What's going on? And he doesn't clearly answer her question, I think. Or maybe he does eventually. I don't remember. The two of them kiki in Canada for a little while, and then eventually they return to South Korea. Why he chose to go to Canada is a little unclear at the beginning, but I think it has to do with the fact that he's buried there. I don't exactly know what is buried there, but there's a headstone with his name on it in Canada, and I don't know why. The next, like, several episodes are the two of them, like, figuring out this whole, like, situation because she's apparently supposedly the goblin's bride, but she can't see the sword. So the two of them are trying to, like, initially I think it's just him trying to, like, get her to leave him alone and her trying to convince him that she's the goblin's bride. And then the two of them are trying to, like, she doesn't know what she's supposed to do as the goblin's bride, but he knows, and she can't see the sword and he can't tell her about it. So they're trying to figure out what they're supposed to do to get her to do her job as the goblin's bride. Basically, they have several cute moments. There's one where she's like yelling about wanting a boyfriend for some reason. I don't know why. They're like in a hotel, I think, and she's screaming because she wants a boyfriend and she don't got one. And she's like, I ain't got a boyfriend. I want a boyfriend. This, that, and the third. And he's like, you have a boyfriend. She's like, where? I don't see no boyfriend. Where is the boyfriend? And he's like, me. I am the boyfriend. Try again. And it's a really weird moment. They're like screaming at each other. It's so dumb. Anyway, we're going to put them on the back burner because I want to talk about the Grim Reaper. First and foremost, he and the goblin live together because the goblin's nephew, who's not really his nephew, thought it was cute to rent out an extra room in the house that the goblin lives in that I think is technically under the nephew's name, because Goblin technically isn't a real person. So I think the house is in the nephew's name, and so he rents out a room to the Grim Reaper, and he and the goblin have this weird like love-hate relationship because the two of them have been alive or around for about the same time period, basically. So, like, the two of them keep running into each other, and it seems like Goblin doesn't like the Grim Reaper at first, but, like, the two of them have this, like, weird brotherly relationship happening. It's cute. I'm here for it. I love their relationship. So, Goblin's really mad at the nephew for renting out a room to the Grim Reaper at first, and then the two of them learn to coexist. Moving on to the Grim Reaper story that happens within the show. He's, like, walking through town one day or whatever, and so is Boss Lady, like, the main character's boss. And she walks up to one of those little street stands where they're selling like random pieces of jewelry, and she picks up this cute little ring, and the Grim Reaper sees the ring and like tears start falling down his face inexplicably. Like, he doesn't know why, she don't know why, and she's like, what the hell are you crying about? And then the two of them like exchange some words, and she tells him to call her. She writes her number down on a piece of paper and like gives it to him, and then walks off. She like asserts her place. She's like, you gonna call me, writes her number down and hands it to him. That's basically the end of the exchange. Side note, the Grim Reaper and like the Grim Reapers in general have no recollection of who they were as human. Basically, all they know about themselves is that they did something awful when they were human, and they're being punished by being Grim Reapers for the rest of eternity. But their memory is wiped when they die, so they don't know what they did to end up as a Grim Reaper. So basically this ring is attached to the Grim Reaper's past. That's why he starts crying, but he doesn't know that, and obviously since she's just a regular woman, she don't know that either. Couple weeks pass, and then the Grim Reaper walks into the like Boss Lady's restaurant, either to talk to the Goblin's bride or something like that. I don't know what he was doing there, but he was there, and she's like, why didn't you call me or whatever? And he's like, yeah, I don't have a cell phone. She doesn't believe him at first, and then I think she eventually does, and she's like, well, get a phone and call me. So he has to buy a cell phone, and here's where we get like a weird little parallel between the Grim Reaper and like Goblin, because even though they've been like alive as long as each other, Goblin has kind of like moved with the timeline basically. So as like technology advances, he adjusts to it and he learns all of the new things that people use. He still writes in like Chinese characters. He also does like use colloquial Korean, and so does the Grim Reaper. He like can text and stuff eventually, but he gets a cell phone. And oh yeah, I didn't finish that thought. So yeah, the Goblin has like advanced with the timeline, and the Grim Reaper kind of just hasn't. I don't know why, but like he doesn't know how cell phones work. There's like several like societal things that he doesn't understand. He's like a socially awkward child, basically. It's really cute. It's really sweet, because a lot of like the episodes where we're like focused on the Grim Reaper story, Goblin is clowning him for not knowing like basic technological things. Like, he gets a cell phone and he goes to Goblin and he's like, I don't know how to set the thing up. Goblin helps him set it up, and then he's like, I don't know what to do. Do I call her? Do I text her? And then Goblin's like, call her, you idiot, with this number that she gave you. Like, this is how you reach her. Goblin does like sort of help him, but he also lets him fumble around with the things a lot. And then the Grim Reaper calls her and then doesn't talk. And then I think he either texts her or he calls her again. He wrestles a lot with how to communicate with her at first, and then he eventually gets the hang of it. And the two of them are like sort of establishing a relationship. It's kind of cute, but also he's like going through an existential crisis about this thing because he's the Grim Reaper. He's like, I probably shouldn't establish a relationship with this random human lady. For some reason, like, he sees her and she makes him like cry when she does certain things or interacts with certain things for a reason he's not certain of. Moving on back to the Goblin and his bride. Their relationship's cute. It develops wonderfully. And then because of fairy tales, the main character at one point is like, maybe we need to kiss for me to be able to do whatever the thing is that you want me to do. Because he keeps asking her if she can see the thing and she can't see it. Oh, going back before I get into like plot points, there's another cute moment they share because she turns 20 at some point, and in South Korea the legal drinking age is 20. They like, at at midnight, she walks into Goblin's room because I think she starts staying there, if I remember correctly. And so she gets really close to both Goblin and Grim Reaper, and Goblin gets a little jealous of her relationship with the Grim Reaper because the Grim Reaper is nicer to her, like consistently nice to her. But on her birthday, the two of them go out and he takes her drinking, and then he has to babysit her because, oh yeah, that's what leads to the conversation about her yelling about a boyfriend. They go and drink for her birthday, and then she starts screaming about wanting a boyfriend while she's drunk. They also go to Canada a couple more times, but like this time she knows she's in Canada. They visit his grave, they visit a hotel that he commonly stays in, and he gets mail there for some reason. I don't know. It's whatever. I think during this same drunk conversation, she suggests that they like kiss because, you know, true love's kiss and yada yada yada, all will work out in the end because that's how Disney fairy tales work. So they like end up in a field a few days later. I think it's a few days after she mentions this, and the two of them like kiss, and it's like this big romantic moment with like not actually fireflies, I don't know, some magical lights happen and there's like a whooshing and everyone's like, oh my god, what happened? And then either following the kiss or a couple days after said kiss, she can now see the sword. But we have a predicament because now they're attached to each other. That's what the deity didn't tell him. They had to fall in love because that's how this whole story thing works. You know, usually they have to be in love or whatever, and then she's supposed to pull it out. So basically, more suffering. Because she doesn't want to pull the sword because she's attached to him and doesn't want him to disintegrate. And he doesn't really want to leave her either because now he cares about her, which is great. It's wonderful. It's funky and fresh. So for a while, they just kind of ignore the fact that, like, the sword is there. They don't do anything about it for a little while. And then, as is common for K-dramas, in the last, like, 3 episodes, everything goes to hell. Like, it all falls apart very quickly. We have like a strange villain who just kind of appears, and he came up maybe once or twice in earlier episodes, but he was just kind of like creeping around the corner watching the main character and making her uncomfortable. He's this really slimy, creepy looking guy. Like, he's a ghost with a really gross looking purple tongue, and his lips are blue, and he's like disgusting. He's probably the most disgusting ghost in the entire show, and like it's weird because it has nothing to do with him being dead. Like, the rest of the ghosts don't look so creepy. It's just because he's the villain that he looks so disgusting. If I can find a picture, it will appear here, and I will make you guys suffer for about 10 seconds so that you can see how disgusting he looks. It's really, really bad, okay? His tongue is purple, his mouth is all blue, he just looks creepy, his teeth are all rotten and gross. I hate him. And his robes is all dusty, his hair is knotted and matted and rotten away. But yeah. So now we have this antagonist that kind of appears in the last episode, or one of the last episodes. He's actually the advisor from Goblin's history. I don't know what happened to him after the prince dies. Like, we don't talk about history anymore once we find out that the prince eventually died, basically killed himself. The assumption is that eventually the advisor takes over, I think. But it's never established. It doesn't matter anymore. Our characters that are relevant in that storyline have officially all died. So we don't know what happens, but I guess the advisor wasn't happy with his ending because now he's a ghost roaming around tormenting this poor little girl. And at some point he's like chasing her, I think, in one of the last episodes, either the last episode or the second to last episode. I remember crying so hard. Or I didn't cry that hard, but I know why people cried. It was really sad, honestly. The main character runs up to the goblin and this creepy ghost is chasing her or whatever. And of course, for some reason, the only way that you can kill this creepy ghost and like get him to stop bothering anybody is to use the goblin sword. I don't know how they draw this conclusion like at all. I don't know where they get this information from. I don't know how they assume that that's the solution to this problem, but that's the solution they draw to. They say, okay, well, you have to yank the sword out of me so that I can use it to kill him, because apparently you can kill a ghost with a goblin sword. So with tears streaming down her face and also him kind of trying to comfort her, she yanks the sword out of his body, and I think she actually uses it to like get rid of him. I don't remember what happens. Moral of the story, the ghost is stabbed with the sword, and then he and the goblin both like poof into like light basically and she's like sobbing on the roof of a building. The Grim Reaper shows up to try and comfort her because the two of them again got relatively close over the course of the show. And actually, you really find out how the Grim Reaper feels about Goblin after the Grim Reaper finds out that she can see the sword now and can pull it out. Because like a couple episodes before this like showdown happens with this creepy ghost from the past, the Grim Reaper is talking to Goblin. He's like, yeah, I don't really want you to go. And that's when you find, oh my god, that part made me so sad when the Grim Reaper was like, I don't want you to go anywhere, like I don't really want you to die, so like maybe don't pull the sword out of you. But yeah, so basically that's what happens. And then there's like this weird wrap-up episode, and I don't remember all of the information. I believe the main character like eventually dies. It's a little confusing because, so when you die, a Grim Reaper is supposed to take you into a room and you drink a soup that is supposed to wipe your memory of your current life. As I understand it, when she dies, the Grim Reaper, like our Grim Reaper, takes her into the room but doesn't wipe her memory. And on the other side of the door, when she like opens it, there is her Goblin as a spirit, and two of them descend or ascend to whatever the next stage of their life is together, I think is how it ends. The ending is a little hazy for me. Those are the parts of the ending I remember. Long story short, this was Goblin in a nutshell. The ending is a little hazy. The rest of the dramas I explain will probably make more sense because I've watched them more recently. I hope you had fun watching this video, and I'll see you guys next time. Wait, don't go nowhere. At the end of all of my videos, I'm going to include a question that you can drop down below in the comments. This week's question is, what was your first K-drama? Drop your answers down below. Like, comment, and share this video if you so please. Also hit the subscribe button and press the little bell if you'd like to get notifications for my videos. So yeah, bye for real this time. See you in the next video.